Jake couldn't sleep for 3 weeks since returning from the desert. He had been staring at the ceiling every night, the crystal device sitting on his nightstand like a glowing reminder that his entire world had changed forever. During the day, he tried to act normal. He went to his lab at the university, analyzed rock samples, and wrote reports about mineral compositions. But his mind was always somewhere else, in that underground chamber with 7 impossible beings who had trusted him with their greatest secret. His colleagues at the geology department started noticing something was wrong. Professor Wilson asked him twice if he was feeling okay during their morning coffee breaks. His research assistant kept pointing out mistakes in his calculations that Jake never would have made before. "You seem distracted lately," his lab partner Alex mentioned while they were sorting through dessert samples. "Did something happen during your Chile expedition?" Jake almost laughed. If only Alex knew that among those ordinary rock samples was evidence of the most extraordinary discovery in human history. But how could he explain? Who would believe him? Every night, the crystal would pulse with gentle light, and Jake could sense her presence. The leader of the alien group, he still didn't know her name, was somehow connected to him through this device. Sometimes he would catch glimpses of her thoughts, her memories, her desperate hope. Through these connections, Jake learned more about their situation. The 7 beings weren't just stranded explorers, they were the last survivors of their kind's attempt to find a solution to their species' extinction. Their home world was dying, not from war or natural disaster, but from something much more complex. Their people had lived so long and become so advanced that they had lost the genetic diversity needed for reproduction. Generation after generation had become weaker, fewer children were born, and those who were born often didn't survive to adulthood. Their entire civilization was slowly fading away like a candle burning out. The visions came to him in dreams now. Jake would see their crystal cities under twin purple suns, beautiful beyond anything on Earth, but empty. He saw gardens that once bloomed with singing flowers, now silent and withering. Most heartbreaking of all, he saw nurseries and schools, built for thousands of children, standing vacant because there were no young ones left to fill them. But humans were different. Earth's people had something the aliens had lost long ago: wild, unpredictable genetic variety. Every human carried unique combinations of traits that had been shaped by millions of years of evolution, survival, and adaptation. Through the crystal connection, Jake learned that human genetic material wasn't just compatible with theirs. It was exactly what they needed to revitalize their entire species. One human, working with their advanced science, could potentially provide the genetic boost that would save their civilization. The weight of this knowledge was crushing. Jake found himself taking long walks around the university campus, trying to process what he was being asked to consider. Students would pass by, laughing and chatting about their ordinary problems, upcoming tests, weekend plans, relationship drama. None of them knew that their entire species had just been offered a chance to save another intelligent civilization. During his 4th week back, Jake made a decision that surprised even himself. He bought camping supplies and told his department head he was taking extended personal leave to work on a book about desert geology. It wasn't entirely a lie. He was about to become part of the most extreme geological discovery ever made. The night before leaving for the desert again, Jake sat in his apartment holding the crystal device. Through it, he could sense anticipation from the 7 beings. They had been waiting, hoping, but not pressuring him. They understood the magnitude of what they were asking. Jake thought about his life, his comfortable job, his small apartment, his routine existence studying rocks that were millions of years old. Then he thought about an entire civilization of intelligent beings who would disappear from the universe if no one helped them. He had become a scientist because he wanted to discover new things about the world. Now he had the chance to discover something about the universe that no human had ever known. More than that, he had the chance to be part of something bigger than himself, bigger than Earth itself. His phone buzzed with a text from his sister. "Haven't heard from you lately. Everything okay?" Jake smiled sadly as he typed back, "Everything's fine. Going on an important research trip. Might be out of contact for a while." That wasn't a lie either. Where he was going, there would be no cell towers or internet. But there would be something far more valuable, the chance to bridge two worlds separated by light years and evolution. As he packed his bags, Jake made mental notes of everything he might miss about his human life. The taste of pizza on Friday nights, the sound of rain on his apartment windows, the simple pleasure of reading a good book under a warm lamp. But he also thought about the alternative, living with the knowledge that he could have saved an entire species and chose not to, going back to his ordinary life while knowing that somewhere in the universe, the last survivors of an ancient civilization were slowly dying out. Jake picked up the crystal one more time. Through it, he sent a simple message that needed no words, no complex explanations, just pure intention and determination. The response came immediately. Waves of gratitude, relief, and something else, hope, for the first time in generations. 7 alien beings felt genuine hope for their species. Future. Jake turned off his apartment lights, locked the door, and headed for his car. Behind him lay everything familiar and safe. Ahead lay the unknown. A journey that would either be the greatest adventure in human history or the biggest mistake of his life. As he drove toward the desert under a sky full of stars, Jake realized he was no longer just a geologist studying Earth's ancient past. He was about to become part of the universe's future. The desert looked different when Jake returned. Maybe it was because he now knew what lay hidden beneath its surface. Or maybe his eyes had somehow changed during those weeks of strange dreams and crystal visions. Either way, finding the hidden entrance felt like coming home to a place he had never really left. The 7 beings were waiting for him, standing in the same positions as when he had first discovered them. But this time, there was no surprise or uncertainty in their glowing eyes. They had felt his decision through the crystal connection long before he arrived. Their leader stepped forward, and Jake noticed something he had missed during his first visit. She wasn't just tall and graceful. There was an ancient wisdom in the way she moved, like someone who had lived through centuries of experience. When she spoke in those musical tones that somehow translated directly into his understanding, Jake felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the desert heat above. "You have chosen a path that few would take," she told him. "We want you to understand what this means before we begin." Over the next few days, Jake learned that becoming part of their world wasn't going to be simple. The 7 beings had been studying human biology since their arrival on Earth, using advanced scanners to understand how different species might work together. What they had discovered was both fascinating and slightly terrifying. Humans and their species were more compatible than anyone had expected, but the process of adaptation would require changes that couldn't be undone. Jake would need to undergo gradual biological modifications that would allow him to survive in their environment and form the deep connections necessary for their species to reproduce. The underground chamber was much larger than Jake had initially realized. Hidden passages led to rooms filled with technology that seemed like magic to his human eyes. Walls that displayed star maps of distant galaxies. Machines that could analyze and modify genetic material with precision that Earth's most advanced laboratories couldn't match. Gardens where Earth plants grew alongside alien vegetation that glowed with soft, natural light. Each of the 7 beings had distinct personalities and roles within their small community. Their leader was responsible for navigation and contact with their home world. Another specialized in biological sciences and healing. A third served as their cultural historian, keeping alive the memories and traditions of their dying civilization. Jake found himself drawn to learning from each of them. The biologist taught him about genetic adaptation, showing him how human DNA could be enhanced without losing its essential humanity. The historian shared stories of their world, tales of crystal cities that sang in harmony with the wind, of libraries containing the knowledge of a million years, of art forms that used light itself as a medium. The adaptation process began slowly. Jake was given a special chamber where the air was gradually altered to contain trace amounts of their atmospheric compounds. At first, breathing felt different, richer somehow, like the air contained more life than Earth's atmosphere. His human body began to change in subtle ways that he could feel but not always see. His skin started to develop a faint luminescence, barely visible except in complete darkness. His senses became sharper. He could hear sounds that had always been there but were too quiet for human ears. And colors became more vivid, as if someone had adjusted the contrast on the world around him. Most remarkably, Jake began to develop what they call connection sensitivity, the ability to sense emotions and thoughts from others. Without the crystal device, it started as just vague impressions, like knowing when someone was happy or sad without seeing their face. But gradually, it grew stronger. The 7 beings were patient teachers, guiding Jake through each stage of his transformation. They explained that their species had evolved beyond physical reproduction alone. They required emotional and mental bonds that went deeper than anything humans typically experienced. These connections ensured that children would be born into a network of loving, supportive relationships rather than just biological partnerships. Jake learned their names and their individual stories. Zara, their leader, had been chosen for the Earth expedition because of her ability to adapt to new situations. Kira, the biologist, had spent decades studying genetic compatibility between species. Nina, the historian, carried within her memory the entire cultural heritage of their people. Each day brought new discoveries. Jake learned to communicate through the same musical language the beings used among themselves. He discovered that their technology was powered not by electricity or fuel, but by a form of energy that responded to focused intention and emotion. Most amazingly, he began to understand that their species didn't see reproduction as just creating new life. They saw it as creating new possibilities for consciousness to explore the universe. After 6 months of gradual adaptation, Jake hardly recognized himself. He was still fundamentally human, still carried all his memories and personality, but he had become something more. His lifespan had been extended far beyond normal human limits. His body had gained strength and resilience that would allow him to survive in environments that would be hostile to unmodified humans. The connection sensitivity had developed to the point where Jake could share thoughts and emotions directly with all 7 beings. It wasn't like reading minds. It was more like being part of a larger consciousness while still maintaining his individual identity. The most profound change was in how Jake understood his purpose. He was no longer just a human who had encountered aliens. He had become a bridge between 2 forms of consciousness, 2 ways of understanding existence. Through him, human creativity and adaptability could blend with alien wisdom and technology. As Jake's first year with the group came to an end, the advanced scanners confirmed what everyone had been hoping for. The biological compatibility was perfect. The genetic modifications had been successful. Most importantly, the emotional and mental connections had developed naturally and strongly. Jake stood in the main chamber, surrounded by 7 beings who had become more than friends or partners. They had become family. Together, they represented something entirely new in the universe, a blending of species that could, potentially, save one civilization while enriching another. Looking back at his old life felt like remembering a dream. Jake had thought he was a scientist studying dead rocks, but he had actually been preparing for something much more important, becoming part of the universe's next great experiment in conscious evolution. Jake had been living with the alien group for almost 2 years when the first miracle happened. It was Zara who noticed it first, a subtle change in her body's energy patterns that their advanced scanners picked up during a routine health check. It's working, she whispered in that musical language Jake now understood as naturally as English. Her star-filled eyes sparkled brighter than usual as she looked at the glowing displays. The adaptation has been successful. Within days, the scanners confirmed what everyone had been hoping for but hardly dared to believe. Not just Zara, but all 7 of the alien females were showing signs that new life was beginning. The genetic blending that had seemed like an impossible dream was actually happening. Jake felt a mixture of emotions he couldn't even name. Excitement, fear, wonder, and a deep sense of responsibility all crashed together in his mind. He was about to become a father, not just once, but 7 times over. And these wouldn't be ordinary children. They would be the first beings in the universe to carry both human and alien genetic heritage. The pregnancy process was unlike anything from Earth biology textbooks. Instead of the typical 9 months humans were used to, these pregnancies would last nearly 14 months. The alien scanners showed that the developing children needed extra time to properly integrate the complex genetic combinations from both species. Each of the 7 mothers experienced the pregnancy differently. Zara, as their leader, remained active and continued making contact attempts with their homeworld. Through her, Jake learned that their people on the distant planet had been monitoring Earth's radio signals for decades, waiting for news of exactly this kind of breakthrough. Kira, the biologist, spent her pregnancy documenting every change and development. She created detailed records that would help their species understand how human-alien genetic mixing worked. Her scientific excitement was infectious, and Jake found himself learning more about biology than he ever had during his Earth education. Nina, their cultural historian, used her pregnancy time to teach Jake about their civilization's traditions around child-rearing. In their society, children weren't raised by just 2 parents, but by entire communities working together. Every adult had responsibility for every child's education, safety, and emotional development. The other 4 mothers each brought their own perspectives and preparations to the experience. Some focused on creating living spaces suitable for hybrid children. Others worked on developing new technologies that could adapt to beings who would grow up understanding both human and alien ways of thinking. As the months passed, Jake realized he was witnessing something that had never happened before in the history of either species. The advanced scanners showed that the developing children were inheriting the best traits from both genetic lines. They would have human adaptability and creativity combined with alien longevity and mental abilities. Jake's own body continued changing during this time. The deep connections he had formed with each of the 7 mothers grew stronger. As their pregnancies progressed, he could sense their emotions, their physical comfort or discomfort, and even catch glimpses of dreams they shared with the developing children. The most amazing discovery came when the scanners revealed that the hybrid children were already showing signs of advanced intelligence while still developing. They seemed to be aware of their surroundings in ways that neither pure human nor pure alien children typically were before birth. Around the 10th month, something extraordinary happened. Jake was sitting in meditation with Zara when he suddenly felt a new presence. In the mental connection they shared, it was small, curious, and unmistakably young, but it was definitely intelligent. The developing child was somehow communicating through the bond between its parents. "Did you feel that?" Jake asked, his voice filled with wonder. Zara's luminescent skin glowed brighter with emotion. "She knows we're here. She knows we're waiting for her." Similar connections began forming with all 7 developing children. Over the following weeks, each little personality was unique, even before birth. Some seemed more curious about the world around them, others appeared more cautious, and still others showed what could only be described as a sense of humor. Jake found himself talking to the unborn children during quiet moments in the underground chambers. He told them about Earth, about rain and snow, about forests and oceans, about all the wonders of the planet where they would be born. In return, through the mental connections, he received impressions of their alien heritage, memories somehow passed down through genetics of crystal cities and singing gardens. The birth preparations were unlike anything Jake could have imagined. The alien medical technology could monitor every aspect of the developing children's health and make adjustments as needed. The birthing chambers were designed to provide perfect environments for beings who were part human, part alien. When the time finally came, Jake experienced something that no human father ever had before. Because of the deep mental connections he had developed with each mother and child, he didn't just witness the births, he participated in them. He could feel the children's first awareness of the outside world, their recognition of light and sound, and the loving presences surrounding them. The first child born was Zara's daughter. As she emerged into the world, her eyes opened immediately, not with the unfocused gaze of most newborns, but with alert intelligence that seemed to take in everything around her. Her skin had Jake's human coloring, but with subtle undertones of her mother's luminescence. Over the next few weeks, 6 more children were born, each unique but clearly part of the same miraculous genetic blending. Some looked more human, others more alien, but all of them showed characteristics that belonged to both species. What amazed Jake most was how quickly the children developed. Within days, they were showing cognitive abilities that surpassed what either species typically achieved in months. They seemed to instinctively understand both human and alien languages, responding to spoken words and musical tones with equal recognition. As Jake held his youngest daughter for the first time, a child with Nina's historian mother's wise expression but his own curious nature, he realized that his life had become something beyond his wildest imagination. He wasn't just a father. He had become the genetic bridge between 2 civilizations. And these 7 children represented hope for not one, but 2 entire species. Looking around the chamber at 7 alien mothers, caring for 7 hybrid children, Jake understood that they had created something entirely new in the universe. These weren't just babies. They were living proof that different forms of consciousness could blend together to create something greater than either could achieve alone. 5 years had passed since Jake first stumbled into that hidden chamber in the desert. Now, as he stood watching a massive spacecraft slowly descend from the evening sky, he could barely recognize the simple rock scientist he used to be. The 7 hybrid children gathered around him, their eyes wide with excitement and curiosity. The youngest was now 3 years old, but because of their mixed genetics, they all had the intelligence and awareness of much older kids. They had grown up hearing stories about their mother's homeworld, and now they were finally going to meet others of their alien heritage. "Is that really a spaceship, Dad?" asked Luna, Kira's daughter, whose scientific mind was already asking questions that amazed even Jake. "Yes, sweetheart," Jake replied, still trying to process the reality of those words. "That's your family coming to visit." The rescue ship was enormous, easily the size of several football fields. As it settled into the landing area that the 7 mothers had prepared in a hidden canyon, Jake felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness that reminded him of his very first encounter with the alien beings. The ship's doors opened with a soft musical sound, and figures began emerging. They looked similar to Zara and the others, but Jake could see subtle differences. Variations in height, skin patterns, and the way they moved. This was his first glimpse of what the alien species looked like when they weren't just a small stranded group. The leader of the rescue mission was introduced as Commander Nova, and she carried herself with an authority that made even Zara seem young by comparison. When Nova's star-filled eyes first looked at Jake, he felt like he was being examined by someone who had lived for centuries and seen wonders beyond imagination. "So you are the human who changed everything," Nova said, her musical voice carrying what Jake somehow understood was deep respect. "Our entire world has been waiting to meet you." But it wasn't Jake who captured Nova's attention for long. When she saw the 7 hybrid children, her composed expression cracked with pure amazement. She knelt down to their level, and Jake watched as the most advanced being he had ever met was rendered speechless by his kids. The children, with their natural curiosity and lack of fear, immediately surrounded Nova and began chattering in both human English and the alien musical language. They showed off their abilities, how they could make small objects glow with concentrated thought, how they could communicate telepathically with each other, and how they seemed to understand complex concepts that took most beings years to learn. "These children," Nova whispered to Jake later that evening, "they're not just hybrids. They're evolution in action. They represent possibilities that neither of our species could achieve alone." Over the next few days, Jake learned about the bigger picture he had become part of. The rescue mission wasn't just about bringing the stranded group home. It was about establishing a permanent connection between Earth and their world. The success of the hybrid children had convinced their government to propose something that had never been attempted in their long history, a formal alliance between 2 completely different species. Nova explained that Jake's genetic contribution had already been studied through samples sent back via long-range communication devices. Scientists on their homeworld had confirmed that human DNA could indeed revitalize their entire species. But more than that, the combination seemed to create beings with capabilities that exceeded what either species could achieve separately. The choice facing Jake was bigger than anything he had imagined. During those first confused weeks after his discovery, the alien government wanted him to come to their world, not as a visitor, but as an ambassador. He would help establish breeding programs that could save their civilization while creating a new branch of hybrid beings who could serve as permanent bridges between the two worlds. But this wasn't just about Jake anymore. The 7 mothers and their children were also being offered choices. They could return to their home world, stay on Earth, or become part of a traveling group that would spend time on both planets. Jake spent sleepless nights walking in the desert, thinking about what this meant. He thought about his old life, his small apartment, his rock samples, his simple routine of studying dead minerals. Then he looked at his children, who could make flowers bloom with their touch and solve mathematical problems in their heads. That would challenge university professors. The decision became clear when his oldest daughter, Sarah's child who had inherited her mother's leadership qualities, came to him with a proposal that showed wisdom beyond her young years. "Dad," she said, "why does it have to be either Earth or their world? We're part of both. Shouldn't we help both?" That conversation led to what Nova later called the most important diplomatic agreement meant in their species' history. Jake would indeed become an ambassador, but not just to one world. He would split his time between Earth and the alien home planet, spending 2 years in each place, carrying knowledge and genetic material that would benefit both civilizations. The 7 mothers and children would travel with him, creating what Nova termed a mobile embassy of hope. They would establish research stations on both worlds, study how the two species could work together, and continue the careful process of genetic integration that could save the alien civilization while enriching humanity's understanding of the universe. Before leaving Earth for the first time, Jake stood in his old laboratory at the university. He had come back to collect some personal items and to leave a sealed letter with his department head, a letter that would only be opened if he didn't return within 5 years. In that letter, he had written a simple message: "I found what I was looking for in the rocks, but it wasn't a mineral. It was proof that the universe is far more connected than we ever imagined. If you're reading this, then I succeeded in becoming part of something larger than one world, one species, one small life. Keep looking up at the stars and remember that somewhere out there, a guy who used to study rocks is helping to build bridges across the cosmos." As Jake walked onto the alien spacecraft with his impossible family, he looked back at Earth one more time. The blue and green planet that had been his entire universe for 34 years now seemed like just the beginning of a much larger adventure. His 7 children pressed against the viewing windows as the ship rose into space, their hybrid eyes seeing their birth world from a perspective that no human had ever experienced. They were heading toward a planet with purple skies and crystal cities, but they carried with them the dreams and possibilities of Earth. Jake realized that his story wasn't ending. It was expanding. He was no longer just a human who had met aliens. He had become living proof that the universe was filled with opportunities for different forms of life to grow together, to become more than they could ever be alone. As Earth grew smaller behind them and alien stars grew brighter ahead, Jake smiled and held his family close. The simple rock scientist was gone forever, but in his place was something infinitely more important. A bridge between worlds, a father to a new kind of life, and an ambassador for the infinite possibilities that waited in the vast, connected universe.